Folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin, and I am your host. Right now we have with us Beanie Geoghegan. She's the Kentucky chapter head of No Left Turn in Education. They're part of a national organization, estimated about having maybe around 10,000 members, but they were their first year anniversary would be this Labor Day. And Kentucky didn't start their chapter till January, this past January. So it's really moving. That's some good growth. I mean, I wish my income could grow that fast. So that's some good growth. Sis, I'm going to have you tell us, what is No Left Turn in Education? What are y'all trying to accomplish?
So No Left Turn in Education, we're a grassroots organization. We're really just a bunch of concerned parents who realized that there were some not okay things being taught in our classrooms. And we realized that thanks to COVID, that in fact, our chapter head, our president, founder and president in Pennsylvania discovered some assignments that her sons were being taught, and went through the proper channels to complain, was met with insults and condescension. So she gathered some parents in her family room, started this group. Tucker Carlson found out about it, and it exploded from there. And so, here we are almost a year later. I got involved with this because of a similar thing. I was walking past my kids' virtual online lessons, and my son, who was a senior in high school, in his English class, they spent about 2 weeks talking about intersectionality. My daughter was a freshman at the top high school in the state, and about a week later, they were focused on internalized misogyny and various other things. We have a lot of other examples throughout the year. So the more I heard, the more I learned, the more I connected with this group, I realized that we weren't alone, and there were a lot of us. And the proof of that is how quickly our group has grown. And I have gotten phone calls and messages from parents all over the state of Kentucky. I think I'm the only person in my district that feels this way, but this is what happened. And lo and behold, we have, a lot of parents in that district who feel that way. So we're trying to educate parents. We're trying to equip parents and empower parents to speak out for their children. Ultimately, what our children are taught with our tax dollars is certainly we have a right to know, and we also have a right to have input into it. And the government does not maintain control over that. We are the first custodians of our children, and not the schools. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about that experience, shared that one experience of the parent who, when they raised some issues with it, they didn't get an open arms invite. Well, come in, let's sit down, talk about it, and let's see if we can be worked out. It's very negative. And I find that I had a similar experience several years ago, really. And I'm amazed at how some of these board members, at least in Jefferson County, one or two of them in particular, can be quite arrogant and condescending.
I have emails from them that I'm holding on to, because I did write a letter after my experience. I wrote emails to the teachers, and I did write a letter to the board and to the superintendent. I even sent it to Frankfurt. And some of the responses I received back from the board members were outright rude. And I'm thinking, I'm the parent. I do have a teaching background. I have a degree in elementary education and special education. I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. I've been involved in the school system for over 20 years now. And for them to respond to me that way, I thought was very unprofessional, not to mention unkind and just rude. So yeah, I think that, to not be able to even have a conversation about this is really interesting. And that's what is happening right now when parents are bringing concerns to either their school or the board, saying, we don't want critical race theory in the classroom. We're being shut down, saying, well, it's not happening. Just leave us alone, walk away. And it's like, well, but we actually have examples of this. Maybe it's not called that, but it's taught that way through that ideology. And so it's, the fact that they won't have a conversation about it causes concern, because I have a little saying that I took from someone else, but truth doesn't mind being questioned, but lies hate being challenged. And I think that that's where we're at right now, that I'm happy to talk to you about my philosophies and my ideas, all day long. You can disagree with them, but I'm able to defend them and tell why I think that they're solid, but they won't even discuss what they're teaching. So.
Yeah, that's the experience I had with here in Jefferson County District 6, the representative there.
Okay.
And it was like, my attitude is that, well, I don't have a child in the public school system anymore, but dude, if I get half a chance to run against you, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
It's my attitude then.
Need some solid candidates to step up.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I did do some research on District 6, and started crunching some numbers here and there, and looked at some of the things they did, and what's happened there, and I was really surprised. It's like, number one, yeah, we can keep these guys accountable. They're not untouchable.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
right.
we can keep them accountable.
But only about 10% of voters vote for school board candidates.
Yes.
And probably fewer than that know who they're voting for. I mean, they vote for the name they see on the sign as they're walking into the, place. So it's, we have a petition that got signed to have the lines redrawn, because they haven't been restructured in quite a few years, and the population has shifted considerably. So, hopefully by the next election, those lines will be redrawn, and we'll be able to have some different pool of candidates to choose from in some of these other districts.
Before we go on with this conversation, what is critical race theory? How are you defining
it? So I've learned more about this topic than I ever wanted to know in my whole life in the last year. And I'm not a scholar about critical race theory at all. I've have read all the books and the articles and everything, and what I know. Basically, what I explain it to people as is a divisive, it's a divisive ideology. It is rooted in Marxism. I even like to remove the race part out of it, because critical theory is dividing people by characteristics. And you can divide a society to weaken a society, to make that society more dependent on the government. Now, in America, race happens to be a soft spot for us. We're still healing from our racial wounds in our country. So I feel like they made a critical race theory here in America because it's a pretty vulnerable spot. And if you say that you oppose critical race theory, then of course, the label you automatically receive is you're a racist, which, they can choose to divide us however they want. If it doesn't work with race, they'll go after gender, class, religion, ethnicity, whatever it is. It's about dividing people. And oftentimes, usually it's dividing people by immutable characteristics that they can't change. There's nothing I can do about being a white woman. Not a thing. I can't change it. It goes against what Martin Luther King taught. We're back to judging people by the color of their skin. We have given up judging people by their character. It's really unfortunate. So I just see it as a very divisive ideology. It's a lens where you see everything through a power structure. Every relationship, every institution, even school assignments you are taught to view that as a power play somehow. And America wasn't founded on that. I mean, even the people who came over here not seeking religious liberty were seeking the freedom to practice business the way they wanted to. They wanted to make money the way they wanted to, so it was more about freedom and liberty. It wasn't founded on this power structure as the people who would.
Well, it's interesting you say that it's rooted in Marxism. It clearly is. As a former Marxist, when I read things and heard things, I was immediately saying, well, this is obviously Marxism. Don't you guys see it? It's obviously there, cultural Marxism, Antonio Gramsci, Herbert Marcuse. It's clearly that way. I was just shocked that it has such widespread acceptance amongst what you might call the education elite. I was really astounded. I think if some people were to, like Michael Harrington, who started DSOC and all these other groups that come back, if they could come back to life right now, I think they'd be stunned at how much these Marxist and socialist concepts have been accepted and been embraced and just right there in our institutions.
Right.
And I don't know, it's surprising. It's shocking. But
It is, but I do think that it is sort of a direct reflection of how our public school system has failed an entire generation, truly.
Mhm.
Because if the school system was successful in educating and not indoctrinating, then this generation would understand how devastating that ideology is and how many people have suffered under that. I mean, I have friends who immigrated from Indonesia, from Cuba, and they're floored. They don't understand this and what they've seen it, they've lived it, but there is this generation that is so far removed from the evils of it and the harms of it that they can't even fathom, and they weren't taught that in school. So,
right.
Yeah.
I think that's the big issue, and weren't taught that in school. And sometimes, people have a tendency to sort of deny reality. I mean, look at all the people from just Cuba alone. Just forget just Cuba alone, the risks, the significant risks they would take jumping on these little rickety rafts and boats and coming across that water to seek freedom. And yet, you have people here in this country talking about how great socialism is.
Right.
You gotta be kidding me.
She's very concerned. My friend from Cuba is very concerned. She laughs jokingly, but kind of not. She said, "There's nowhere else to take a raft to. This is it. This is the last stop." So
yes, the last beacon. Yes, we are. Yeah, I totally agree with her. Even though, like you say, she's probably saying it in a funny way, humorous way. Yeah, she's absolutely correct. Because I've traveled all around the world, and I'm telling you, you're not going to find a country that has more liberty and prosperity than the United States of America. And
so, well, what changed your mind? You said you were a former Marxist. So what changed your mind? And I mean, that will be a helpful thing to know. The people who believed in that before and were changed, moving forward, that would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's with a lot of former Black Marxists, Thomas Sowell, Walter Williams,
Yes,
those brothers, Eldridge Cleaver. What we just have in common is every slight thing was different. Everyone's slight experience was different. Like I wouldn't like Eldridge Cleaver. He was exiled in France, and he has this really interesting spiritual conversion. And I think with Thomas Sowell, he just sort of said, "Man, this stuff ain't making no sense."
he always says facts. What changed his mind?
Right.
Facts. That's
Facts, right? I think for all of us is all that subtle combination of, wait a minute, this is not making sense.
Doesn't make.
Just that didn't make any sense. And I think too, our faith somehow or another came up. Our faith background somehow or another came up. Because even Clarence Thomas, so in the Supreme Court, as you know, he even talked about that in the latest documentary they did on him. He even talks about that, how the role of faith did. Eldridge Cleaver, interesting enough, he said that one thing that hit him was he felt that he saw Marx, Engels, Lenin, Mao, somebody else, and then he felt he saw the face of Christ. He didn't know what to do to accept Christ as a savior, so he just remembered back to years and years and years ago when as a little boy, his aunt taught him a prayer. He didn't talk about going to Sunday school or church or anything like that. He went back to a prayer his aunt taught him when he was a little boy. Little boy. And you got to remember this guy, he wrote Soul on Ice. And in Soul on Ice, he talked about how he raped women for political reasons. He practiced on Black women. This is in his book, Soul on Ice. He practiced on Black women. Then later he went to white women. He wanted to become, a better rapist, to rape white women is his expression against
Wow.
the white capitalist oppressors. Okay. And he was a major figure in the Black Panther Party, Minister of Information. Soul on Ice was a major, is almost considered like a left-wing classic.
Mm.
And, so that's the kind of person he
That
was.
power, that lens of power.
Yes. And that's an interesting thing to point out, regardless of what Marxists say, Marxist, socialist, communist, whatever you want to say, it all comes down to power over people's lives.
Yeah.
And just because I come up to you and say, hey, I don't like poverty, it's horrible, we got poverty and we should help people. And then I turn around and kill people. You disagree with me. And some of those people who I disagree with me are the oppressed workers I'm trying to help. I mean, it comes out. I mean, you look at the Russian Revolution, you saw that. You look at Che Guevara, you saw that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's all there. So maybe I shouldn't say this, but that kind of stuff didn't necessarily change me, so to speak. But what got me was like just little simple things like, well, I can say pretty much whatever I want to say to the United States and not really worry about getting my booty kicked by the government.
Absolutely.
But I knew you couldn't do that in North Korea or Cuba. I knew that.
Yeah.
I knew that.
There's a lot of places you can't. I mean, it's
right.
It's illegal to homeschool in Germany still,
Right. So,
Why? Because
I was like, well, how's this better? How's having a socialist America going to be better for me? And it just then it slowly and surely just hit me. And there, I was a big advocate of the revolution in Zimbabwe, Patriotic Front and all. And then I had the good fortune to be able to travel there soon after Mugabe had taken power. And I was at a party, so I was excited. I thought people would be excited. We got Mugabe in power and socialism and all this other kind of good stuff. And sis, they were scared to talk.
Wow. It's that First Amendment that we just take for granted.
Yes.
We do.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the people, my friends who are immigrants, have noticed that, and Rod Durer talks about this in his book, Live Not by Lies, how they noticed that people whispered. There was especially the time, prior to the election, where people would whisper the things that they believed or felt or, their opinions. They would whisper them. And the people from other countries are going, why are we whispering? We have the First Amendment here. This is not okay. Because it's not going to be the government that shuts down our speech. It's going to be the culture that shuts down our speech. And so you can't say, well, the government's infringing on my First Amendment right. Maybe it's not the government, but it's going to be the culture that cancels you or blocks you or shuts you down. Or, there's all these flags going up on social media right now in case you were exposed to some kind of evil that you're not aware of. So, it's going to be the culture that silences. But the First Amendment is so important. And I think that for so many of these, especially young people, just don't really appreciate what the First Amendment does for us here in America. It's unique. It is so unique. And so
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely correct. And the emphasis you have there on culture, again, it was cultural Marxism. It wasn't quote unquote traditional Marxism.
Right.
It had an impact. It was called Antonio Gramsci, Marcuse, and all those guys. It's the cultural Marxism. And I think sometimes that's why sometimes I would even, it would bother me. I'm trying to organize Black conservative podcasters for us to do things like this, just to talk amongst ourselves and to talk about things that's happened in the national Black community. And obviously to talk about critical race theory. But one thing also to talk about how many times Black Marxists are able to get away with murder because they're Black. They're Black and they're anti-racist, and they're perceived as anti-racist, therefore they're perceived as being pro-Black community. And like one stark example of that is Angela Davis. She was a member of the Communist Party USA under Gus Hall, straight up Stalinist. Now there was a split in the party, and she went with the split sort of away from the Stalinists, but she's a hardcore Marxist-Leninist.
Right.
And then a couple of years ago in Alabama, they do an annual reward, Fred Shuttlesworth. he was the man who influenced King to become an activist minister. And they were going to give her the Fred Shuttlesworth Award. Imagine that.
Wow.
You're going to give somebody an award who's been advocating this system for decades that will shut you down as soon as they come to power.
Yeah. Yes, but our culture is in the habit of putting people on pedestals who maybe don't belong there. We have started celebrating some more negative behaviors rather than celebrating the positive. And in fact, we tend to not we, but the culture tends to denigrate those who speak out on truth and what is right. Those are the people that the culture would actually like to wipe off and not recognize. So yeah, it's really unfortunate. And
yeah, I agree. So it was
that is stunning. It truly is.
I mean, we're gonna give
give an award.
A Marxist a reward for civil rights.
But I do. I think it was Dr. Lowry who wrote the article after they put the George Floyd statue up, and how he felt, and I think it was him, and I apologize if I'm wrong, but and how he was saying that he felt like it was an insult to the people who have gone before, who truly did amazing things, that the Black heroes and heroines of our country who blazed trails and paved way for people. And those are the people who deserve statues and should be celebrated. And I would have to find the article to verify that it was him that did it. They weren't. It was really,
you're right. Those who came before us were not career criminals. That guy was a career criminal. His record is clear. It's obvious. He even had an incident where he, during part of some type of robbery or something, a home invasion, he pointed a loaded gun at a pregnant woman's stomach. I mean, can you imagine a Medgar Evers having doing something like that, or Whitney M. Young, or Rosa Parks? I mean, it's ridiculous. And even this thing with Breonna Taylor, she's all over the place. Well, I'm sorry the sister got killed. And speaking as a parent, I'd probably die if my daughter got killed. But before that time, I would be saying to her, wait a minute, you're under what type of criminal investigation? For doing what? And you're associating with who? Better call your mama, girl.
Yeah, and I think that there's certainly a way to mourn the loss of individuals and to make sure that justice is done in whatever the situation is. But I think that making heroes out of everyone who is unjustly killed is not necessarily the way to go. I know I have 4 children. I have a certain expectation of the people that they would look up to, that they would want to, sort of strive to live in, or, follow in their footsteps. And those aren't the qualifications for my kids. And I feel like that's across the board. I don't think that that's, just one race that wants their kids to look up to high standards and do that. You can address injustices without putting people on pedestals that maybe don't.
Right. No, I completely agree with that. But the problem we're having more within the Black community is that we don't have voices saying something that simple. They're silenced. They're suppressed. Yeah. Oftentimes with very abusive language. And that's the issue. Again, as you pointed out earlier, the cultural factor.
Right. Right.
I cannot tell you the number of times I've talked with Black folk privately. Corbin, I can't believe that. Oh, well, man, come on my show or say something on Facebook. No, I can't do that, man.
Yeah.
And they express legitimate fear. Some express fear of losing their jobs, that kind of stuff.
So when you walked into the celebration after the socialist government took over and you saw people in fear, and then you walk into these places and you see people living in fear, it's not that different, except that one is being silenced by the government, and the other one is being silenced by their next door neighbors or their peers. And so it's really unfortunate that we've come to that place in our country. We need more conversations. We need more speech. We need to be talking. We need to be having discourses that are productive and healing and bringing reconciliation. And we're not. People have just shut down the conversation.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And, let's go back to critical race theory a little bit. I often, I I don't mind engaging a little intellectual tug and pull here and there,
Yeah.
but Lord have mercy. What does this have to do with education, critical race theory? When I just pulled up some stats, actually from an article you had posted from 2018 to 2019, Jefferson County Public Schools. This Jefferson County Public Schools openly admitting this. This is from them, not from me. You know, this isn't from your group. This isn't from someone like a Trevor Loudon or a Larry Elder. This is from them. Only 27% of Black youth in the elementary school level are at the reading proficiency level. 27%. 27%. And that's just one, on middle school level reading, Black students, 32%. Middle school, 32%. High school, they reported 20%, went down. 27, 32, 20, went down. And yet, the graduation rate is in the high 80s and 90s. So basically what you're telling me is that they're issuing diplomas to people who are just functional illiterates and doing this time and time again. Dude, we
have decades of research and data to support the fact that students who learn how to read by the time they're in third grade are exponentially more likely to be successful, to stay in school, to either go on to secondary school or be successful in a trade by third grade. So in my opinion, why are we pouring millions and millions and millions of dollars into, they're calling it diversity, equity, inclusion. It's basically critical race theory in practice. And rather than pouring millions and millions of dollars into, they call it wraparound services, wrap around these kids, get these kids learning by the time they are in third grade, because once fourth grade hits, they're no longer learning to read, they're reading to learn. And you can't read to learn if you can't read. And so you say it goes down in high school. Well, because by the time they get to high school, they've checked out. They can't read that social studies book. They can't read the science book. They've checked out, they're done. I mean, all you have to do is read a few Facebook posts of people who graduates of some of the public schools here in our county to know that they can't write sentences. That you ask a college professor about their first year English students, they can't write a paper. They can't do that. And then we want to talk about the wealth gap. There's this wealth gap. Well, you are graduating people who cannot read past fourth grade. How exactly are they supposed to compete in the workforce and get that promotion if they don't have the same skills that the person that they're competing against has? Because you let them move through the system to be equitable, to keep our diversity numbers down. You let them move through the system, but you didn't equip them with the skills. And that is an injustice. And every parent, every taxpayer, everybody should be livid about this. Our millions of dollars should be going to teaching these kids to read. Frederick Douglass said, once you learn to read, you cannot be enslaved. They cannot be enslaved by false ideology. They cannot be enslaved by generational poverty, addiction, abuse. They can get out. They have the means to get out. You talk to Ben Carson, his story right there in a nutshell. His mother made sure he learned how to read and loved to read. And that's what he did. And he escaped. And everybody says, well, he's the exception to the rule. No, he's not. There are millions and millions of successful Black people all over this country. And to say that he's the exception is an insult to the Black community, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You're saying that they can't achieve. And I think that that's insulting.
But critical race theory, does it teach that? Or does it teach something else?
Well, critical race theory removes the personal accountability. So basically it tells them that you're not achieving because the institution is not, the system is not allowing you to achieve, rather than saying, you know what, you're coming a little bit behind, because we do also have statistics on the, the early childhood education with minorities versus other populations. And they do lag behind in early childhood. So they might come to kindergarten a year or two behind their peers. All that means is we need to provide more wraparound services for those kids. It's not because the system is going to keep them back. It's because we need more resources in place. I am all for that.
And are we not also, you touched upon this earlier, isn't this also an issue of who is the first, last, and best educator for our children?
Yeah. And that's one of my big things that I remind parents. It's our responsibility. At the end of the day, it is our responsibility as parents. You know, my children, my daughter in advanced English, the #1 high school in the state of Kentucky, read one book this year in her English class. One book. My son, senior English, 2 books of his choice. I mentor some high school students, and they were in AP Junior English, which is the top class in junior. They're the cream of the crop students. These are global or Governor Scholar students. They're at Governor Scholar right now. Not one book all year. Not one book all year. So what that means is, as a parent, I see that and I tell my kids, you're not reading in school, you're going to be reading at home. You have to read, you know, and however you do it. Yes, the schools should be educating our children. They're using our tax dollars. They are our children. They should be doing that. If they're not, it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to make sure they know their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s before they start school. It's our responsibility. It's not the government's responsibility to do that. That's how it is in Germany. The state wants to educate their children because the state wants a certain type of education. I don't want that in America. I want to educate my own children, and I want to have some say in how they're educated once they go to school. So
you've pretty much have defined America. What makes us unique, different, in that it's about liberty.
Yeah,
it's about you taking on responsibility.
Yeah,
and it's about liberty. We had many examples, you know, post emancipation, where Black slaves just got together, former slaves got together and say, okay, how are we going to do this?
right, exactly. And they did.
How are we going to pull this together?
I mean, it's, you know, it's truly amazing and remarkable what they did. And that needs to be studied. And, you know, we were talking, I was talking with a friend the other day about, you know, why do we teach history the way we teach it? And when we introduce our country's history in early elementary school, we really talk about all of the great things that happened in our country, you know, the early settlers and the explorers and, you know, just even our early government and everything. We don't talk about the ugly stuff usually in early elementary. And I said, because we need these students to know that there were obstacles and hardships that these early people faced, and they overcame them and created what we have today. Now, as they get older, there's certainly hard topics that need to be touched on. But first and foremost, we need to teach our kids that this country was founded, even though there were so many obstacles, you know, in their way, even though there was so much hardship, that they persevered, they had resilience. And it's the same thing in the Black community. There were so many obstacles in the way, and there were so many hardships faced. But even still, look at where we are today. Not perfect. We're not done. We still need to have these conversations, which is a whole nother danger, because the way that it's being taught right now, it is being talked about and taught in such a way that they are shutting down the conversation among some young people. They will not have those important conversations because they're so tired of hearing about it. And that's dangerous. Because then you have a generation of students who don't know about the civil rights and Jim Crow, and you know they need to know that. They absolutely need to know that, but they're going to shut down because they're tired of hearing about it.
And what I would add is that really, you know, the Marxists, you know, as you said, we knew that was the sensitive spot, you know, racism, right. Community. We knew, and that we pound on a lot. Even at the level of Joseph Stalin, he talked about the so-called Negro question and what needed to be done. His solution, of course, was to split the country, to bring up the what they call the Negro nation within the United States, to destroy, so, you know, to separate. But you know, it's odd. It's like sometimes I had to say to my daughter, I said, you know, we are the victims of our great success. Of course, when my father's recruited to the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights, he was to create fair housing legislation and all. And one of the places where he would go speak was in Northern Kentucky. And of course, they didn't want no Black folk in that area. So I say to my daughter, today you and your mother live in Northern Kentucky. No problems, no issues. But that's because of the work your grandfather and his colleagues did, Black and white, by the way, right, who did the work before that time. Right. That's success to me. That's success to me. there was a time in this country, as you know, when Booker T. Washington, he went, had dinner at the White House, came out to the news. You'd think the man went up there and played dice and pinched the first lady in her booty or something. They went nuts. Today, we had a 2-term Black president. And he's up, we're honoring Aretha Franklin and everything. That's the Black story in the United States is really the story of America's greatness, America's success.
Well, and I think that you and I are viewing that through a lens of success and hope for the future, because we know where it's come, and of gratitude for the people who've gone before and who have fought those fights. Unfortunately, those who would peddle critical race theory view that from the perspective of, yeah, but why was Booker T. Washington treated that way in the first place? Yeah, but why weren't Black people in Northern Kentucky in the first place? Rather than saying, okay, it was bad. I mean, we know that. We're not, right. No opponent of critical race theory is saying all of that stuff was okay. Nobody is. And that is a false argument when people say that. What we are saying is we're looking at that as that was successful, and we owe those people gratitude. And in living out that gratitude, we keep perfecting. We keep having those conversations. We keep improving the situation. We keep making sure that things are equal, not equitable necessarily, because we cannot control the outcomes. I have 4 children. They have gotten the same level of parenting. They have had the same opportunities, the same resources, and I'll guarantee you that their outcomes will not be exactly the same. If I can't do that for my 4 children, there's no way we can do that for 100,000 children in the district of Jefferson County, let alone all over the state of Kentucky. So I think that one of the things that is lacking in our young people today, in our society today, is gratitude. Every day I'm filled with gratitude for everything in this country, in my community, and the people who went before me, the people who just encouraged me, and gratitude is missing from so many, because you have this sense of entitlement, and that goes across genders, races, ethnicities, religion, everything. It's so that's just
and when I'm looking at these stats, reading proficiency no more than 28%, I'm not seeing how critical race theory is going to help boost that. To me, it's just common sense. Dude, we got to teach math. We got to teach reading. The science stats are just as low. I just got depressed after I did the reading and the math stats and went to science. The first science stat was 10% proficiency. I stopped right then and there. See, we need to go to the basics. You want to talk all this crazy stuff about, well, you brought up intersectionality, LGBTQ, TIA. What are you talking about? It's crazy.
I looked up, there's a middle school here in town that it has an after school club called Pretty Brown Girls. And it's a good club. The club is meant to empower young brown girls is what they, under the description of it. The principal was able to fund this club, which I'm not really sure how that goes. I can't find that out because I didn't think principals were allowed to fund clubs like that, but they were. But this particular middle school is 80% minority population. And the reason that they said they started this club is because the girls there felt ignored and overlooked. Now it's 80% minority population. So I'm not sure how they're ignored or overlooked, since they are the majority in the school. But then I looked up their proficiency scores, and I believe their literacy proficiency is 24%. Now, the principal is taking any money from the school and funding an after-school club like this when you have a literacy proficiency rate of 24%. I would be livid. I want to say their math proficiency was in the teens. I would have to go double check, but it was, I don't care. You can have all the after school clubs that you want. You can have, and I don't care what they're called, and I don't care what they do, but your academics better be in line before you go funding any after school clubs that do anything. And that's where I think this is not just a parent problem. This is a taxpayer issue. You wouldn't pay for any other service that produces this level of results. we would not stand for that as taxpayers, and yet we are. And, you know, for those girls, I hope that they're empowered. I hope that they find their voices, but I hope that they are well educated when they do. I was talking to a group yesterday, and I said, you know, the role of the school is to cultivate the next generation of well-educated citizenry. Instead, what they're producing are poorly educated social justice warriors. And that's dangerous. It's dangerous for the students, and it's dangerous for our country. And we've got to get back to the basics, and we'll give them, I mean, open the way for them to have a voice. Our vice president happens to be a woman of color. I don't know if they noticed that or not, but she is. And, you know, so there's definitely avenues for that. And I think that there are, gosh, Dr. Carol Swain is one of my favorites. She's absolutely amazing. I could listen to her all day, but we have to make sure that they're well educated first, so that they can think critically and process things with their experience and information, and you know, really apply intellect to it rather than just being motivated by feelings and emotions, because that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. Sis, I've gone over my time limit. That's what comes from having a good conversation.
That's right.
Good thing we didn't have no food here. I definitely would have gone another hour or so. So, but I really appreciate this. We'll probably have this out in about 7 to 10 days or so. And then we'll obviously give you a copy and encourage you to share this with other folk. Yeah. And, you know, maybe we can do this and have a couple of friends and
I tell you who I would really love to chat with on here is Ja'Cory Arthur. He and I go back to his teaching days at Hyde Elementary, and we are friends who disagree pretty strongly on a lot of issues. But we had a conversation a little while back, and we both jokingly said, you know, what we need is an adult version of J.A. Biztown and Finance Park. We were just, you know, how can we help the people in our community? So, but he's fun to talk to because we don't agree, and it's fun that we can have a respectful conversation where we disagree. So,
right. Where you can disagree and not worry about going to Facebook jail or something like
that. That's right. That's right. But I appreciate you having me on. This was great. So thank you so much.
And sis, we will be in touch.